Everyone, welcome back to AdBits. This episode is supported by 2.0 Films, a boutique service production partner based in Ljubljana. We work across Slovenia, Austria, Croatia, Northern Italy, and Serbia. If you've got a bid, I'm their EP based in London. Give us a call. So today I'm joined by Marta Bobić. Bobić, is that the way to say it?
Bobić.
Bobić, yes, not Babbage. Marta is the UK Managing Director, Partner and Exec Producer at Canada, one of the most respected creative production companies operating across London, Barcelona and LA. She's been there for over a decade, which in this industry says a lot. Before that, she was Director of Relations and Special Projects at Wieden in London, so she understands both sides of the agency production relationship. Today, we're talking about longevity in a fast-moving industry, building a real trust between agencies and production, protecting creativity while running a commercially sustainable business, and what it actually takes to lead a production company long term. Marta, welcome.
Thank you, Alex.
Yes, welcome. You started on the agency side at Wieden Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
What did that experience teach you about how agencies really operate beyond the surface? It's just on that point, I find it fascinating because we're so siloed and never the two will meet, and it's amazing if you think about it. But so what did it teach you?
I was really lucky. I mean, they're one of the very best, and it was a really creatively led agency. So I mean, it's the only agency I worked at, so I can only really speak to what Wieden specifically taught me, but I always really admired how the work really did come first, and people really cared about it. They cared about the details, and I've tried to carry that forward because I think everything that people see that has Canada on it or that comes from us, it needs to be great. It needs to be perfect, and that's something I learned there. And I guess what applies to agencies in general is just that I got to see the journey the work goes on before we see it. And there's a lot of twists and turns, and things evolve actually very slowly on the agency end a lot of the time, and by the time we get it, there's a whole history that we don't know. So that's taught me a lot to sort of come at briefs with a sense of understanding, and also to ask a really important question, which is, what are we trying to say or do with this? Because you can just get lost in sort of briefing a creative idea that is about the execution, but you forget what the strategy behind it is. And I think it's really important for directors and EPs to be asking, what is this piece of work supposed to do?
It's a really good point. It seems so obvious to outsiders, but it's just fascinating. I keep talking about this with people where the lack of empathy production companies have for the process and the journey is shocking. And also the indignation of why it's not the most creative pieces in so many times, and you wish to push back and rewrite it for them, even though they've already done that a million times. I mean, again, this is going straight into the same thing. So what do production, I sort of touched on it as did you, what do production companies consistently misunderstand about agencies?
Something that I've always thought, but has really, really become apparent now with the landscape changing and the business models changing, is that production companies don't understand the pressures that agencies are under. You can say they don't understand the pressures that we're under as well, but if everyone's not communicating properly. But their business has changed, and their clients can now take these project-based briefs wherever they want. And it's it's not the days of 10 years of retained business anymore. And that affects attitudes. The staffing's different. I think a lot of production companies don't really understand who is involved in the process and how important all those people are, because you can have great creative, but without good account handling, it doesn't mean anything, or without good production. So yeah, I think agencies and production companies should try and understand each other better, because I think we can work together better that way.
So a bit more love, maybe.
Yes, a bit more love and understanding.
Love and understanding, as with everything.
Yeah,
okay.
Actually, sorry, just to add, I think a lot of there is a lot of us and them mentality that I've seen in the industry. I mean, not at Canada, but and not at Wieden's, but I see it around and I hear it, and I think it's so unhelpful, because we are all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to make great work, and there is a situation in which we can all walk away being happy, but you kind of have to work together.
Yeah, it's interesting. You don't hear anything like that enough. I never hear that at all. And from your perspective, has the agency, I mean, you've already mentioned this, but from your perspective, has the agency production dynamic shifted over the last decade? And, is it healthier, more transactional, or just more pressured? Or probably all of it, isn't it?
Probably, yeah, all of it. I think it's also just more varied because there isn't just a standard model anymore. And I think it's quite an exciting time in London because of all the startup agencies that are coming out and trying to do things differently. Obviously, sometimes that has positive consequences on our business, and other times it's negative. Like, we all can't ignore the fact that in-house production is happening, but at the same time, brands are starting to take creative in-house. So a similar thing is happening to agencies that's happening to us. And, I think we just have to be adaptable and flexible at the end of the day.
I think that's a really good answer. Okay, so now we're going to talk about building Canada UK. When you joined Canada, what was the ambition for the UK office?
Well, Canada had a brand already and a voice. And I think one of the most important things to us is to make culturally relevant work and to leave a mark on culture. And we wanted to do that in the UK because, there are great opportunities, there are great bands and brands and artists and labels in the UK, and I think you can't authentically be part of culture if you're not living it. So the idea was, how can we take advantage of all these great opportunities in the UK and build something whilst keeping the Canada brand? So that's kind of why they were looking for somebody that had agency experience but also production company experience to sort of be able to grow it in a way that still felt really authentic and local.
Because, okay, that's interesting. It's interesting to specifically look for agency and production side as well. So, because that's not normally the case. It's again, like we spoke earlier, it's one or the other. What does partner actually mean in practical terms beyond the title?
Oh, that's a different answer every day. I suppose it's my job alongside my partners, Nicolas and Lope and Albert, and who are, Nico and Lope are the co-founders and directors. And what we really care about is keeping Canada consistent, keeping the creative great, but also making it a great company to work for. And I think everything we do has to feed into those different areas. So it's about looking at our talent strategy, looking at the business and what it needs and how we can sort of keep up with changes in the industry, how we can keep making great work, looking at sometimes it's stuff like looking at our policies and our values, and other times it's chatting to directors that we want to sign or hiring. It's a lot, but ultimately I think our job is to steer the company in a way that makes it a great place to work and that makes great work.
Interesting. This is always a fun one. How do you balance creative ambition and financial sustainability?
That's a tough one.
The endless challenge.
I don't have a formula. There isn't, we don't have a set of rules where we say, okay, this kind of project we invest in, this one we don't. Or I think we have to evaluate every single thing we do on the circumstances that we're faced with, which is, what value is it to us that isn't financial, that, it might have some intangible value that kind of moves in the world of culture and PR, or it might be something that builds a relationship with someone, or, you have to, I think if as a production company who have a duty to represent talent and look after their careers, if you go into every project just thinking about the financial aspects of it, no one's going to be happy. I'm sure we could, be a bit closer to those, the lawyers that we spoke about, financially, if we did that, but then our work wouldn't be our work. Sometimes we, music videos, we don't make money on music videos. And that's an intentional choice because it has a different value. So yeah, the answer is I don't know. I think we have to trust our guts, and I think we all love to work closely together, and we talk about it and we say, we debate it and say, okay, this could be great for the reel, but budget's too tight. It's a thing that I think it's something that we have to always figure out as we go along.
Good. And has your definition of success changed over the years?
Not really. I think I've always wanted to make work that I was proud of and enjoy the experience. And I think for me, success is when we leave a project, whatever shape of project it is, that we leave it and we're proud of it creatively. We're not in a hole financially, but also that everyone's had a good experience, and I think that's how I measure success as Canada, and actually and personally as well. Staff is really important, and I think if you have people who feel respected and looked after, they're gonna put everything into making great work. So yeah.
That's a good answer. And now we're going to go into the invisible work, as I've described it. Executive producing is often invisible when it's done well. What does a great EP do that most people never see?
I think a lot of it is relationship building. It's the relationship with the director and becoming that trusted person, because we work in a world of freelance producers, and a director wants their person, who's going to guide them, who's going to, in between jobs, be looking at which jobs they should be doing or not, and bidding the jobs in a way they know they can get the most out of it. So I think that trust is so important. And then on the other side, the EP is looking after the company's brand and reputation.
Yeah.
We may not be doing the sort of boots on the ground producing all the time, but what we are doing is making sure that that experience has reflected well on us, on our director, and that there's a lot of diplomacy, I would say, but also just listening. I think that's really important, is just to be able to read the temperature of the situation and know how to balance, like you say, sort of the commercial and the creative, and also to be thinking about the future, like where do you fight your battles on every job? Because you have to pick your battles. Sometimes you have to let something go because it's going to lead to something else that, other times, you have to fight because you have to respect what you set out to do and try and get it. So yeah, there's a lot.
It's interesting because people don't really understand sometimes what an EP does. And it's exactly as you said. It's like, especially now with a lot of companies becoming smaller and bringing in freelance teams, you're the only real link to keep everything going, and the brand of why I'm working with this company over another. Obviously there's the talent as well, but it is so much about that, and people forget that a lot.
It is, and also I think there's that sort of thing that as you get more senior in production, the more you dread the phone calls, because an EP gets a phone call usually when there's a problem, or something that needs some kind of support or an answer. As an MD, you only get the call when things are really when it's really, really stressful. So I think there's that sort of like escalating chain of problem solving, and that's what you need to be able to do, right?
This is an interesting one. I'm fascinated to hear what you say. Where do productions quietly lose money?
Everywhere.
I was talking today with someone just today about again the perennial issue of bidding, and they did a 90-page doc. I still are fascinated, like, why are we doing this? These epic tomes that people are doing for pitches, and then they heard nothing back, and you're just like, they spent 3 weeks.
I know. Exactly. I mean, the pitching, it costs us money. We have quite a useful model where we do have in-house research and design, and we use that, but that's that doesn't save us from costs and treatments entirely, and it's a balance. So that is a painful thing. I think also sometimes the creative not being aligned with the budget, and while we don't pitch something that isn't achievable, I think sometimes there is just a misalignment in general, where we've sort of said yes to things and been ambitious, and then the client doesn't really want that same level, and I think there you end up sort of sometimes just throwing money at that problem, and it maybe that's one of those times you have to have that conversation and say, why are we actually doing this job, and what is it for? And then finally, I think just some of the things we don't charge for. I mean, we should be charging for EPs, because they are, our markup, which I don't like calling it that, our production fee is limited, right? And that covers so much. And, you know, we're not charging for finance, we're not charging for legal, we're not charging for EPs, and it costs us.
That's a very good point. Okay, this is going to be an interesting one as well. I'm fascinated to hear. So what's the hardest commercial decision you find yourself making repeatedly?
Investing in music videos. 100%.
I hate music. It used to be when I was doing it when I was production side, I would not hate, but the music video thing was always really, really challenging. It's so difficult because, yeah, it's just so difficult, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's
an investment.
It's where we come from. So we will never not see the value of a music video, because it's also what attracts us to a lot of our talent. It's where we get to see who they are. And, you know, and that thing I was saying before about culture being really critical, is that's another thing I learned on the agency side is, you know, a brand wants to reach people. People care about what's in culture. If you reach the people making that culture, you're reaching the public. And so we know that there's so much value in music videos, but it's getting more and more painful. And, you know, it's a battle every time, because, you know, again, that's sometimes where the ambition doesn't match the budget. And, you know, no director's going to say, oh, how can I make this smaller? How can I make this more achievable? Because it's such a great opportunity. So, you know, we find ourselves having to walk away from things sometimes, or, you know, just turning them down. And equally, sometimes with commercial work, maybe it's not my decision, but it's something I have to deal with, is directors turning down work, which you have to respect, because a lot of the time those things pay off. But, you know, it's sometimes really hard to say no and just feel okay.
I find it really hard for directors I used to find it really hard directors turning down and not slightly hating them for it a little bit, when we had like in the gig, you know, it was in the cat, we had the gig. But it is a balance. It's very difficult. Okay.
It is.
And next question, and for young directors listening, beyond taste, what should they focus on if they want longevity?
I think understanding the industry, learning about it, because I think that the ones that do really well can navigate it. It doesn't mean you have to have agency experience. I think it's just sort of understanding how things work in the different models, whether, you know, whether it's film or music videos or commercials, because I think then you learn where you have room to operate and where you shouldn't waste your time. And also sometimes it's communication skills, because at the end of the day, a director can be incredible, but if they can't communicate their idea in a treatment, on a call, in a pitch, you know, even on set, sometimes it's over. Then they're just making nice mood boards, you know. So I think that the ones that we see do well really care about, you know, collaborating, and again, still sometimes fighting those battles, but working with the people that they're supposed to be making this thing with, and, you know, being really specific about what they're trying to achieve.
That's really smart. It's so true. Communication in everything is just the key, isn't it? So at 2.0 Film, we often see brands trying to balance creative ambition with real world constraints all the time, obviously. And then from your perspective, what's the smartest way brands should approach production partners today to get the best outcome?
I think giving us as much information as possible. And, you know, when it goes well, when we're faced with those situations, you know, the easiest way to solve problems is to know what the priorities are, and to know what you're working with and what's important to people, because we can try and protect that and maybe see another way to compromise on something else that won't affect that area. I think ultimately, if we know what someone's trying to make, what their priorities are, and then we get a very honest budget, and, you know, we can always work with that. I like to think there's always a solution, as long as we have all the information.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay, so next one, we'll talk about longevity in relationships. So how important is chemistry in long-term creative partnerships? I mean, I would say it's key, obviously. But
I think it's really important. I think it's something that takes work. It doesn't just sort of manifest one day, and it's not that it's either there or it isn't. But there's a reason that we're structured the way we are, because different people have different relationships. And I have relationships with our directors, so would the head of new business, so would our EPs. And I think that chemistry is really important, because ultimately we are affected by each other. Our brands cross over, and we have to be sort of aligned, I think, or at least be able to have honest conversations, because I think without that, it's never going to be a long relationship if you don't have honesty. And I think sometimes even you have to bring something a little bit emotional into it, just a little bit. I think because like we were talking about earlier, we're really lucky to do what we do.
Yes.
We make great work, and that work, yes, it can sell things, but it can also move people. It can make real meaningful change, and that's a really privileged position to be in. So if we can all be really honest about stuff and just remember that, like, the love that we have for what we do, yeah, that's when things last, I think.
Okay, great answer. And okay, on to the next one. Does loyalty still exist in this industry, or is everything short term now?
I wouldn't say so. I think.
So you're saying it doesn't exist?
No, I think it does. I
Yes.
think it's, maybe I would change it from sort of loyalty to, I guess, perhaps loyalty is now it's not as blind. It is conditional loyalty. Reputation means everything. You can't afford to have a bad experience, because that is what will break that loyalty. I think it is harder to earn the loyalty, but it definitely still exists, because at the end of the day, everyone wants that trust and knowing something works. So if you have a sense of trust, then it's easier to be loyal.
Interesting. Yes, it was. I think what you said before about it being blind at one point, you're absolutely right. I think there was just more time for everything as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And how do directors, would you say, stay relevant over time without chasing trends?
That's it's kind of like the $1 billion question. I don't know. We're very sort of unconcerned with following trends. So I'd like to think that it's directors who know their voice and have confidence in who they are, and at the same time are willing to experiment and not just do the same thing over and over again on autopilot. Because as with the creative industries, what you do becomes who you are, and then you just get more of the same. So I think sometimes you still have to sort of test the boundaries and try and experiment. But ultimately, the directors who do best are directors that are ideas people, not execution people, because they're always hungry. They're writing, reading, and so many of our directors are great writers, and we have a film and TV department as well. And that's a really interesting space where you want directors that are sort of more multifaceted, because I think they get satisfaction from that. And for us, it makes them a more three-dimensional director.
It's great. As you're talking, I'm thinking you're doing these. This is all great, and it's so much easier being the other side, asking the questions at the moment. I have to say, because they're really difficult questions to answer. Some of these, I find.
They are, but really, really interesting questions. So thank you.
I'm glad. And so at the moment, like, what advice would you give someone who wants a long career and not just quick wins? I think you touched on it with the communicate. For me, communication, obviously. Yeah. So what would you say anyway?
First of all, just be a good person, because it matters. It matters, and people know and people talk. So I think that's the first, that's the thing that will very quickly take someone down, and it's hard to recover from that. So I think treat people well, show an interest in what the people you work with do, and find your people, the people that you trust, because if they're on the same journey with you, you'll go further. But in terms of creative work, I think it is that same thing, like, have excitement for it and treat each thing like an opportunity. You know, some of the most iconic directors around, they're people that are just so excited by, you know, every time being able to work on something and seeing it as a bit of a gift. So I know that's hard to cultivate when you're looking at budgets and schedules and different constraints, but I think having that sort of that excitement and passion is really important, because that's where you evolve, and it's where you you know, you want to always keep trying to do better and better and better. And also maybe just turn some stuff down. I know I'm contradicting myself, but I think, you know, at the end of the day, the reason I can't bear too much of a grudge when our directors turn projects down is because, you know, them being a bit selective and curating the work the way they have is what caught our attention. So you don't want them to start doing things that will dilute their own reel. You know?
I mean, they've got to find their voice.
Yeah,
they've got to shout their voice. Their work has to communicate what they're about, and that's what you're going to buy into. If it's just diluted, like with everyone else, there's too much of that around.
It is, and then you sort of, they don't really know who they are, and they become a little bit of, you know, if you take every single opportunity and you don't have a connection to it, it kind of shows. So I understand, you know, there's obviously practical reasons why some directors do that, but then pick what you show, because that's what people see and that's who they think you are. And it's really hard to change perceptions. It's very, very difficult. It can happen. It takes a lot of work, but it's very difficult.
Especially when you've created a little film about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, what am I about? There's a film about it, highly visual, to all the highly visual people as well. That is challenging. Well, listen, Marta, thank you. There's something so reassuring about long-term leadership in an industry that moves this quickly. Relationships compound, trust is earned, and commercial awareness doesn't limit creativity, it protects it. If you enjoyed this episode of Our Bits, follow the show, and you can share it with someone who cares about, protecting standards in this industry. Ad Bits is powered by 2.0 Film. I'm their London EP. We cover Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Northern Italy, and Austria. If you need a fast turnaround, top-tier crew, standout locations, give me a call. I'm Alex Grossman, and see you on the next one. Right, we're out. And
thanks,
listen,
Alex.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate